welcome to the 11th week of the Revenants comic hiatus. Only 2 weeks ago till new pages start going up. I'm not having a panic attack, you are. So yeah, if you have somehow gotten to the 11th Q&A and you haven't read the comic, please go check out revenantscomic.com. You can read all the archive back there, all 10 chapters that are currently available. And if you want to click through to subscribe to the comic on a webcomic host, such as Webtoons, Tapas, Comic Fury, and Fur Affinity, there are links out from there as well. So yeah, revenantscomic.com, go there, read the archive. New pages are going up in 2 weeks. I'm totally fine about it, no problems. So with the hiatus starting to draw to an end, I got a very special episode for us today. So my very, very cool wife, Jess, who's also a very, very good illustrator, has submitted a bunch of questions for me after some bullying on my part. And she had just had some really great questions and observations as a fellow illustrator. So I thought it would be quite fun to answer some of her questions. She submitted enough that, as I say, it has become this very special episode, which I answer wife questions. She would like to be credited as wife, according to all of her responses on the form. So there you have it. Special episode from my wife Jess. Very, very talented illustrator. She hasn't posted links, but I feel like I have to share her behance because her stuff is so much better than mine. Personally, personal opinion. She did the cover for chapter 6. I'd say you can't pick your favorite children, but I have to say that the favorite one is from my wife, right? Obviously. Even though all my covers are absolutely excellent. So there's actually a gallery on the comic website as well. If you want to see all the covers in full color, that's the place to go and see it. And chapter 6 was by Jess, and like I say, one of my all-time favorites. So let's jump right on into it. I've got my first question here from Jess, and she asks, when you redeveloped your original storyline for the conspiracy into Revenants, what was the most surprising or interesting change for you? I think, a bit like how I mentioned last week, the bones of Revenants kind of hang off of the conspiracy. In the broad strokes, a lot of the stories pretty much stayed the same. There's still a lot of connective tissue between the two. A major change I had, the original story was almost all canines. I was coming off of reading like a lot of Lackadaisy cats when I was drawing the conspiracy back in the day. Like the original pages of Lackadaisy were still going up, and a cast full of cats was quite a fun approach, I thought. So my approach kind of became, well, I want to draw all canines. So a big change was like, well, now I actually want to have different animals mean different things. And that came from when I was in Varsity already writing about animals in animation. I had Electra go, oh, why is this character represented by this animal? And I didn't have a good answer despite writing an essay about it. So that became a major theme of the reboot. Was like, well, I actually want to have the animals have more symbolism this time around. I thought that was quite a cool new take on the original story. Like, you kind of had a little more to read into the animals that I chose for each character. And I have intentions, obviously, as the creator of the comic, but there are also interpretations, and I want people to interpret them in different ways. And that's kind of what was quite nice with this version of the story. Ooh, the second question is a good one. Are there any background Easter eggs that no one has spotted yet in the pages that have been released so far? I feel like there might be a couple. I'm going to quickly pull up my iPad and look at what pages that I have up live so far. Early one that was very much for my South African readers is in chapter 1. Todd and Glitch end up waiting at a bus stop that has got snout insurance on it, and that is the dumbest pun in the world based on a local South African insurance company called Outsurance. So I don't think a lot of my international readers would have got that outside of just the joke of snout. I had a couple local people go, that's great. Not a lot of people internationally would have gotten that joke. Oh, another good reference. I think someone might have pointed out its existence but not gotten the full sort of impression of what it meant. In chapter 3, at the university, when Todd and Josie are sitting outside, there's a monument of a spacecraft. And what it is the original craft which took Laika, the dog, into space. Still the story that kind of makes me sad every time I think about it. I just thought it was quite a fun reference to have like a spacecraft as a national monument at the university, because in universe, the currency of choice, which has a 1-to-1 approximation to the South African rand, is the new Canis Laika. So the characters don't bring it up often, but the currency for their setting is the Laika, as a bit of a nod to the space program that this dog was involved with. I'm told Laika basically just is the Russian equivalent of calling your dog Spot. I think that's quite a fun little detail too. But yeah, that was one Easter egg I have in chapter 3 as well. Oh, following on with that, in chapter 3, Todd pulls the dud round out of his revolver with the primer that's been struck but not actually gone off. And the branding on the back of the round is a bit of a nod to a local ammo manufacturer called Pretoria Manufacturing Press. And I've just kind of added like a little NCA, like New Canis Armories or something like that. And then instead of like little symbols that would be on the back of a head stamp, I've got those little paw prints, which is also a nod to Conspiracy, where I used a lot of paw prints because I was a very young illustrator, having discovered anthropomorphic characters as comic foils for the first time. So fewer paw prints in this one, but there are a couple stamped into the back of that head stamp of the 38 special he pulls out. This is a super subtle one, and literally no one would probably get it. In chapter 8, when Todd's looking at his phone and he sees the news broadcast from the New Canis Broadcasting Corporation, kind of riffing on the SABC logo, being the South African Broadcasting Corporation and our national broadcaster. It was also strongly inspired by a Varsity project we had to do, where we had to redesign a logo for the South African Broadcasting Corporation, and I was very, very into strong block sans serifs at the time. Still kind of am, but definitely looked at what I did in like second or third year for the SABC and turned it into the NCBC. Another vague reference in chapter 8. I think I might have mentioned it in the artist comments, so it's maybe not that big of an Easter egg, if you're a patron, I guess. On page 7, Todd drops Josie off at her class, and I just basically looked at one of my favorite buildings on the Wits University campus as reference and did a 3D model based on that. It's one of the buildings next to the archaeology department that I used to walk past pretty much daily on my walking commute from my parked car to classes. Oh, in multiple instances when you see the fridge in Todd and Glitch's flat, there is a green piece of paper with a circle cut out of it on the fridge. And when I was trying to think of what things I personally stick up on my fridge on a regular basis, it's the license disc renewal for my car. So a lot of the stuff on the fridge there is inspired by my own fridge on a regular basis. So yeah, I think that sums up some of my favorite Easter eggs. I think there are a couple more I've probably missed. Some my patrons might have known, some I don't think it would have been possible for anyone to know because they were that obscure. Maybe some of the furries who bought my comic at South African FurCon caught a couple of them that I slipped in there, but yeah, no, I think those are a couple of my favorites that I managed to get into the first 10 chapters. Ooh, this is a very good technical one, and again, from an illustrator far better than me, I would like to point out. But I know exactly the thing she's referencing because this confused a lot of people when I first started uploading the comic. In the first chapter, Todd wakes up Glitch by shooting him with a Nerf gun. Unfortunately, in the black and white release, we don't get the fun colors. So it looks like Todd is straight up murdering him. What are some of the things you have to think about as an artist who creates work first in color, but knows it'll also need to work with all the color stripped out? And actually also someone in, I think the Discord, had a moment of, oh, I didn't realize all your pages were actually in color first, but all your thumbnails are in color on all your hosts. And I was like, yeah, no, they're all in color first. I just slide it down into grayscale for the free releases, just as a bit of a Patreon perk to have the color pages come up there. Down the line, I'm pretty sure the color pages will go live to the public. They're certainly all going in the print editions I like to try put together every 5 chapters. But yeah, grayscale is the public pages. To be honest, I could probably consider that a little bit better sometimes. The only time it really has caused a lot of confusion was when my super saturated orange and blue Nerf gun started looking like a real pistol. Even with the proportions looking more like a toy than like a real gun, that definitely confused a few people when Todd pulled out a pistol in that chapter and everyone was like, where the fuck did he get that? Yeah, I think, if anything, considerations like that, which I should have thought of in the illustration phase, was make the gun look more toy-like. Early in the story, I hadn't shown a lot of actual guns on screen, and I like to try and really cram in the detail on them, so it wasn't clear that this was a toy. And maybe there are a couple other instances where characters refer to things that maybe color would really help. Like I say, I've been a bit slack on it because the end game is to eventually release the color, but if I were to draw a full black and white comic, which sometimes I think I want to do, maybe as a let's just get away from the Revenant story for a bit, maybe I should draw something simpler and shorter, I would probably go into a more stylized inking style. For Revenants, I didn't want to have big fields of like fully black and stark white. It didn't suit the sort of style I was going for, but maybe I would go for something more contrasty in future to do a comic that was explicitly black and white. Start looking at like the real crime noir sort of style of things like Frank Miller. A lot of American comics love big fields of black, and obviously manga, that sort of stuff. I would probably start analyzing that a little more closer and how they do their brushwork to give us texture and directionality and shadows and everything like that. Like, I would probably look at more explicitly black and white comics to refine that down the line. The current ink work I'm doing right now is very much based on something pointed out by Scott McCloud in Understanding Comics, is that Long Clair, which I'm definitely saying wrong, but the clear line style of a lot of French cartoonists, obviously Hergé and Tintin, a little bit of maybe Asterix, those were all comics I grew up with, and they would have very, very neat and tidy lines, and then the color do a lot of the heavy lifting, and that's kind of what I'm going for in Revenants. That doesn't necessarily translate to black and white very well. So yeah, I think it would almost be a style overhaul if I wanted to consider black and white to be the primary focus, which was never really the primary focus of Revenants. So I'd have to kind of consider that in future if I wanted to do that again. Sorry, my dog just arrived and I just patted her very loudly. Ooh. Jess told me that I would be busy on tonight's episode, and she's given me something that I can talk about at length, very angrily. The question is, you love to rage against the Adobe ecosystem. What are some good alternatives for people who want to get into digital art and animation, but don't want to give money to a soul-sucking AI demon? Yes, I believe my opinions on Gen AI are quite strong, but nuanced. So I'll be quick to say that, look, I understand that AI, quote unquote, is a buzzword. It's a marketing term. I work in advertising for a living. AI is just being stuck on everything that could be plastered with AI in an effort to make sales and the line go up. I have zero problems with technologies that improve medicine, technologies that improve agriculture, make us more efficient at growing food for ourselves, distributing it better, making people healthier in general. Those are not the AIs I have a problem with, because those aren't quote-unquote AI, they're algorithms that improve people's workflow and make people better at doing what they're doing. My huge problem is with generative AI, large language models and stable diffusion models. And that's because it has unfairly taken work from people who lovingly crafted it, put it up on the internet either for free to just get a little bit of exposure, or for a client because they made it for a client, and now that work is being taken without compensation. You can't type cat into Midjourney and get a pencil drawing of a cat that they scraped off of, like, you know, someone who's just started drawing on DeviantArt's page. You get something that looks like concept art, and that's by design. They've taken all that work from people who are actually genuinely fucking good at what they do, and they've taken that money from them. Like, they've taken that work from them, and they've taken that exposure from them, and that's something I have a huge problem with. And obviously Adobe has the plagiarism machine bolt right in these days. They all want to give me a walking tour of their new generative tools, and I hate it. I hate every second of it, and I think it's wrong, and I think it's bad for them that they've done that. So for me, I'm trapped in the Adobe workflow. Like I say, I do animation professionally. My clients provide Photoshop documents, Illustrator documents, After Effects projects. So as much as I would love to completely cut ties and go straight to Blender for everything, that's not going to work for all of my clients. It'll work for some of them, but not the vast majority, who are all agencies who are paying Adobe for the work because ethically they're not like an independent artist who can afford to cut ties. Even if an agency was like, we're going fully away from Creative Cloud, they would be in the absolute minority, and it's a really hard thing to do at a professional level. It's easy for an independent artist to completely cut away and go to Clip Studio, go to Procreate, and still be able to do 90% of their work. You can't do that with Adobe at a professional level yet. Even today I was having a conversation with the artist doing the compilation cover, and she's at the mercy of Adobe because it's the only app that talks to her scanner, and she does traditional art, so she needs it as part of her workflow. But that being said, if you want to get into comic making, illustration, now more than ever, there are open source options that don't have AI built in and actually care about artists. Procreate's a big one. They've always said they're never going to integrate AI into their workflow. You are at the mercy of having to own an iPad and an Apple Pencil to make use of it. I think they're talking about a PC version, maybe an Android version, so that's worth looking out for, and I think Procreate's been worth every cent for me. Procreate's honestly the huge reason why this comic is viable at all for me, because to sit at my desk drawing in Photoshop would not be a vibe. So Procreate's been a huge part of my workflow. Unfortunately, then I end up in the Adobe suite after that. I have tried Affinity. The Affinity suite's really good, and I've been very happy with what poking around I've done in it. Problem is, I'm not comfortable enough with it to take on professional work that would substitute Illustrator and Photoshop in it. So I just want to spend some more time in it, but I think it's worth looking into if you want to steer away from Adobe. Then there's obviously Blender, which is both 3D, and they've got Grease Pencil for animation. I think those are worth playing around in. There's like tutorials for days about Blender. Krita, Krita, and TV Paint, which I briefly taught 2D animation in. But my understanding is obviously it doesn't have all the AI bloat in it because it wants to simulate the traditional 2D animation process as much as possible. So I think now more than ever, like, open source is really available. I have this conversation with like former colleagues from studio spaces like all the time that when I was studying, I was on the tail end of you have to learn Maya at a certified place to get an industry job. Because right as I stepped out of that qualification, I met the first person who had taught themselves Blender in high school. He was younger than me, and he was he was who I was reporting to as someone who had just come out of like his second postgraduate degree. So now more than ever, open source has changed the game. I think if you're not at the mercy of something like After Effects, like I am, you can step away from Adobe. And I kind of strongly recommend you do, because they're just getting more and more shitty, forcing in this AI buzzword to satisfy like shareholders. And that's something that's been pointed out. All of Autodesk software, Autodesk bought and killed all my favorite 3D apps because they are beholden to shareholders. Blender is open source. Many other apps are these days. You pay either a really small once-off fee or it's completely free and they encourage you to donate. Now more than ever, someone can teach themselves how to do all these things at home and can find industry level work for it if they've got a reel good enough. I'm always going to be like, listen, I work better with like Electra leaning over my shoulder, giving me things to do. But if you're someone who's very self-motivated, you can get into the industry or freelance easier now than ever. I kind of recommend the studio experience just to know how your local industry works. I found that helped me a lot when I did several years in the industry before going freelance. Honestly, the bar is so low these days if you're good at what you're doing and if you put in the time to get better. Natural talent counts for something, but you got to nurture it, and all this software is available and out there for you. And if you want to, I think you should totally try it. As expected, that became a little bit of a rant. May have been edited down a little bit for time because I'm just looking at how long this recording has gotten in, of all apps, Adobe Audition. Maybe I should have Audacity. I don't know. I'm paying for Audition. I'm using Audition. Am I probably selling my voice to Adobe for AI use right now? Probably, and I fucking hate that. And our final question from my beloved wife tonight is a very deep one, a very intense one, very personal one. And the question is, can I have some mac and cheese, please? If you've listened this far, Jess, let me know. I'll go make us some mac and cheese. So yeah, that brings us to the end of Q&A 11 of my 12-week hiatus. Next week is something special, the final week of hiatus. I've got something planned. Be sure to check back in. If you're on Patreon, you get it a week earlier. Otherwise, yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, go through to revenantscomic.com. Go see where you can read the comic, be that on the original site, on the host site, or on all of the mirrors that are listed up top. And like I say, Patreon, Ko-fi, if you want to kick me a couple of bucks, I'll really appreciate it. All the money is pretty much going straight back into the comic at this point, commissioning artists for covers. And I will see you next week for a special finale of this hiatus, and then new pages after that. So be there. I'd love to see you guys there.